The weekend became the weekday. Monday became a Tuesday. The afternoon became the evening, and the rest was inevitable. It's Mission Log Live. I'm John Champion, and Ken Ray is in the shop for some routine maintenance, something about a ball bearing or a crankshaft. I'm not too good with this kind of stuff, so you'll just have to take my word for it. In the meantime, joining me this week, a good friend and a very special guest. You know him, you love him, you don't know what to make of him. He's the co-host of Priority One, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. We will welcome Elijah momentarily to the show. Can't wait for you all to meet him because you've heard us talk about Priority One, and now you get to meet the man. But you know the drill by now. Mission Log Live is the show where you, our Star Trek pals, join us, your Star Trek pals, to talk about Star Trek. And it's not just limited to Trek. Nope, it could be anything you like because we are here for you. And tonight's show is all about you. You've sent us questions and comments. I've been looking through the news. I've been reading everything that I can. We might answer some of your questions, might not. We don't just make up an answer, but we've got you standing by, ready to call in to join us in the Zoom meeting. So you can join us by clicking on that Zoom meeting link that you'll find in the Facebook post, or you can use the one smartphone, or you can even call us at 669-900-6833, then punch in the meeting code. Those numbers are on screen for your convenience. Now, normally at this time, I like to say hello to everybody who is in the chat, and we'll get back to that in just a second. But joining us now, hot off the heels of recording Priority One, let's welcome Elijah. Elijah, how are you tonight? And how'd the show go? Oh, I have no audio. I have no audio for you, sir. We're going to unmute you. Oh, that's torture. That's just the worst thing. We're torturing Elijah by keeping him muted. He's got a little button down there in the lower left-hand corner. We'll unmute him. Yeah.
You know what that was?
Boy, rookie mistake.
I had the mixer down. I had the volume up. So thank you, John, for the amazing introduction. Yeah, it was a great show. We had Anthony, one of our hosts, just had a baby. And
Anthony had a baby?
Yeah, well, his wife had a baby.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Okay.
And so he's going to be taking care of his family for the next 2 weeks, and we are filling in the gap with our new host, of course, Kat. And this week we had Star Trek Online's community manager, Ambassador Kel, join us as a guest host. So it was a great episode. And then at the very end of our live stream, Star Trek Online's lead designer Al Rivera came on, and Kat, one of the latest ships, one of the latest ships in the game, a D7 from the Discovery era that just was released last week, I think. It was a real pleasant surprise for Kat as a new member of the team. It was a kind of a welcome aboard, welcome to the family kind of thing. So it was very nice of them. It was great.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you could join us tonight. And I know that it is not easy to do back-to-back podcasts, back-to-back recordings. So I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining. And now we're going to say hi to some folks who are in the chat. We got Scott Palm. We got Rick. We got Carlos. Carlos says Ken is getting his robot guts checked. And you're absolutely right. Finn, with a shout out to you. Elijah, all exclamation points, all caps right there. We got Paul. We got Dave, we got Kim, we got Cosmo. He says Ken is at the station Picard went diehard at. So I think you're probably right there. We got Matthew. Let's see here. There's David Takechi. We got Penny, Josh. Just so many of our friends who are checking in with us. Glad to see you all there. And of course, to all of you, don't forget to call in because, I mean, look, Elijah and I could talk all night. We really could, but that would be a lot less interesting for you unless you're here on the line with us. So give us a ring, click on the Zoom meeting link and join us, and we'll talk Trek. Or if you want to know what Elijah had for lunch, he'll tell you that too, or he'll just make up a story. So we, of course, want to thank you all for checking us out here live on Facebook, or if you catch the video later at youtube.com/RoddenberryProd, that is cool too. Or certainly the audio-only podcast, well, we welcome you there too. Wherever you find us, please hit like, please hit share, and let the world know that we'd like everyone to join us here on Tuesdays to talk Trek. And, look, Elijah, I'm tooting my own horn about Mission Log Live. And for the longest time, we would promote P1 coming up after our show. But it's worth reminding everybody that you guys now precede us. You're recording at 5 p.m. Pacific. Is that right? 8 p.m. Eastern. Yep.
That is right. That is right. We because now a majority of our hosting team, actually everyone of our hosting team, is now on the East Coast. It's easier for us to start before and earlier in the night so that we're not up until the wee hours of the morning recording. So we are live on Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're live on Facebook. We're live on Twitter via Periscope. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Twitch. And like I said earlier today, we have occasionally a very special guest, sometimes surprise guests drop by from Star Trek Online. So we encourage you to check us out on Tuesday nights at 8, right before Mission Log, because it's a much different show than what we produce on Fridays.
Very good. By the way, I don't know what, Carlos, I don't know how I prompted this. What if we poke John with a pain stick? Really? Unless that's the name of a tiki drink. then lay on. That's fine. That's good. Hey, let's talk about some business coming up, and then we're going to get to our poll question, and then I know that we have at least one caller. We got Brian standing by, so we're going to get to him. Let's see here. Coming up, San Diego Comic-Con. We've got panels. We have the Roddenberry Presents panel. We will also have the Podcasters panel that Larry Nemechek puts together every year. But in between, we're going to have the Mission Log Libre meetup. That is July 18th at 4 o'clock at Havana 1920. So come to that. It's very informal, so informal. I have not told Havana 1920 that we're coming. But they have this great upstairs bar. I got to hang out there a lot last year. It was a blast. So if you're going to be in San Diego for Comic-Con, get away from the convention for at least a little while. Come have a drink with me and Ken and a bunch of other Mission Log listeners and Mission Log friends. Your Star Trek pals will all be there. Then we will all be at STLV. That, of course, is Star Trek Las Vegas. Starting on July 30th, that's when we have the landing party. That's the Tuesday night party for all you early arrivers. Then the convention runs Wednesday through Sunday. So much happening there. There's the Roddenberry panel. There's the Mission Log panel. There's the Roddenberry Podcast Network panel. Elijah, you probably have other stuff going on there, right?
Nothing we're ready to announce yet.
Okay, then forget it. Then just come to the table and hang out with Elijah and me and Ken and Allie and the women at Warp and so many people. It'll be a jam-packed Roddenberry podcast table this year. So come by there and come by for the fire sale on all the products because this is it for the Roddenberry products. So if you're in Vegas, bring your cash over to the Roddenberry table. This is it. This is the end of the line for Roddenberry products. And then, Elijah, you got some notes about stuff coming up where you're going to be.
That's right. Actually, this Thursday, just 2 days from now, the Roddenberries, a Star Trek themed rock band, is doing their second album release. Now, John, you remember the Roddenberries were at they played on the stage, on the Roddenberry stage on the 50th anniversary at STLV.
Yes, and they're awesome. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So they're doing their second album release party with very special guest J.G. Hertzler. And he's going to be in full costume the whole night. Like, that's going to be crazy. That's going to be nuts. Him as Martok. That's happening June 27th at the World Cafe Live in Philadelphia. You can get tickets on ticketfly.com. Do a Facebook search for The Roddenberries. You can also go to theroddenberries.com. Tickets are on sale, and I'm really looking forward to this event. We interviewed them a few weeks ago. They're excited. They're a bunch of Star Trek fans just as much as the next person, and they've got great music. I can't wait for this party. I really can't.
Excellent. That's very good. Hey, by the way, as you were doing that, I was taking a look in the chat. Apparently, there are some glitches with the stream. A lot of people are saying, well, if you just close out and come back, you'll be in good shape. So thanks for sticking it out with us, Rick. Tate, yeah, I didn't actually call your name before, but glad to see you are in there. Let's see who else. Casey, of course, Casey does his thing. He calls out Cooley whenever he comes into the room. So glad to see you're there. And then David and Steve Sheridan, our buddy, but David saying he's going to hit Rod's garage sale at Vegas. Now, one other thing, we have more Sansar events in the works. So if you missed the last two, you can go check out the video of Larry's Stellar Cartography event. That is on youtube.com/roddenberryprod. And the last one, the White Room screening, was so cool. In fact, it was so cool, we're going to do it again. So keep an eye out for events at Sansar, events.sansar.com. And you can go sign up for your free account there. You don't even have to have the VR goggles to do it. You can use it in desktop mode and check that out. So Sansar.com, and they will be in Vegas this year with a demo there. So if you haven't been able to experience it for yourself yet, come to the demo table and they will show you all about life in virtual reality, and specifically in the Roddenberry Nexus and the Roddenberry Theater. Now, Elijah, I don't know how familiar you are with the rules here on Mission Log Live, but every week we do a poll question.
All right.
So last week we asked, do you get your Star Trek news through social media? Elijah, you might be saying, why in the world would you ask that question? Well, last week was right at the end of a very volatile week on social media for Star Trek news. Now, 82% of you said yes, 18% of you said no, and I guess we're all guilty of getting our news through social media. I'm not surprised that the majority there gets their news through social media. The difficulty is whether or not we believe it and whether or not we follow up on the actual sources of that news, and we're being very careful about picking apart news and rumors, because boy, did it get out of hand last week. This week, I wanted to pose a question that might be a topic that you and I get into. I asked, do you feel represented on Star Trek? Now, there's a lot of Star Trek, and people are asking which series, what time frame, through what characters, et cetera. But, we're talking about the whole Star Trek universe. There's a lot of Star Trek out there. So far, 84% of you say yes, 16% of you say no. It'd be interesting to get into those answers and if we get into that conversation. By the way, it looks like we lost Brian, who had called in. Brian, call back. Earl will get you connected, and we'll get you here on the air with us. And all of the rest of you who are watching who want to weigh in on anything that we talk about tonight, 669-900-6833, type in the meeting code, or just click on the Zoom link that is conveniently there on screen for you, and then you will be connected to us just chatting away. A news bit unrelated to Star Trek, but very cool. Did you watch that launch last night?
I missed it. Totally missed it last night.
Oh, okay. Earl saw it. And dude, go back and watch the video. It's a night launch is cool anyway. And these Falcon Heavy rockets are just immensely powerful. They stick the landing with the two boosters always when they touch back down on Earth. But that third booster that they keep trying to land out in the ocean, it was not good.
Where did it fly out of? Where did it launch from?
Oh, well, this time it flew out of Florida.
Okay.
So it went out of Cape Canaveral, and it was close enough to land when the two boosters come in that they could just bring it right back into Florida. But the third one it's too far out because it's got to stay with that rocket longer and longer to get it up into orbit. So that's the last one to come down. They can only land it in the ocean at that point. And it was, I
can't remember if it was last year or I think it was late last year in the fall, early winter. They did a launch not far off of Maryland, and I got to from where I am in Jersey. I parked my car and I was able to see from a distance the rocket go into orbit. It was amazing. It was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen live.
So cool. Yeah, they're just beautiful to watch. And then when you see those things land, when you see those two boosters come straight down, I mean, it looks like something out of a 1950s sci-fi movie. So yeah, super cool. Go back and watch the video on that. Let's talk about another news item too before we get into any other discussion here. The latest news of the week: Short Treks returning with Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck. No word on Pike yet, but we did get a picture that was shared out on Instagram from the director, and he's there with Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck, not in makeup, not in costume, but they're just as themselves. and he says that they were working on a short track. So we will at least have number one and Spock back. I'm assuming in this time now that the Enterprise has left space dock after the end of season 2 of Discovery. Did you check that out?
Yeah, we reported on it for This Week in Trek News, our Trek It Out segment. And, this kind of spins off a little bit on something that Alex Kurtzman had said in the Deadline podcast that rounds last week. I am all for Star Trek content. Absolutely. 100%. Something that I had voiced concern with is that in that podcast, it almost sounded as though Kurtzman was saying, I want to throw everything out there. I want to make as much as humanly possible. And my only concern about that is that in terms of Star Trek, right? In terms of Star Trek content, my only concern with that is there is a limit. There is a limit to the depth of that wallet, right? Yeah. So as much as he wants to throw at the wall of Star Trek and see what sticks, I'm concerned that if it's not quality content, if it's not content that grips an audience, that at some point a higher up is going to be like, no more.
All right. So let me ask you this then, because I get the idea that, a season of Discovery is like 13 to 15 episodes. Okay. A season of Picard, what have they said now? Like 10 or 12 or something like that. Season of the animated show, the first animated show that we know, maybe 10 episodes, 12 episodes, something like that. So the idea is that if you want to have a year's worth of content, I mean, the old days, we get 26 episodes in a season, but now you've got to have at least 2 shows to make that up, right? So I guess the idea is, well, if we want to have at least 2/3 of the year or 3/4 of the year have original Star Trek content, that will manifest itself in different series that'll have different angles, different production styles. And if you're not a Discovery person, you might be a Picard person, or if you're a kid, you might be into the animated thing. So I want to ask you, well, what are the ones that you are excited about? Or is there something they have not yet announced? So you say, oh man, what I really want to see is this other thing. And do you think that if they are breaking it up, like let's say Discovery runs 5 seasons, that's being conservative, but 5 seasons of 13 to 15 episodes, is that okay? Because then you've got an overlap of these other shows that are different shows, different styles that kind of go off on their own trajectory.
I mean, I think that from what we've heard and what's been announced already, I'm excited for the adult. Honestly, I think I'm excited about the cartoons.
Okay.
Even the one coming out for Nickelodeon. I mean, I don't know if one of the last animated series that I watched and was really impressed by was Disney's Tron. It wasn't Legacy. That was the film.
No, but it was the Tron animated show that came after Legacy, and it lasted about 10 minutes and it was gone. Yeah.
Right. But
Tron Uprising, Earl with the wind, Tron Uprising.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a great animated series. I mean, at least in my opinion, I thought that it was well produced. I thought the storyline was fantastic, and went into a world that we've only had 2 movies about, really, in some way, shape, or form. So and I think that animation gives you an opportunity to tell stories that isn't necessarily limited by the constraints of CGI making it look real, so to speak, and spending all that money. I think right now about, for instance, DC cinema versus DC animation. DC animation does some phenomenal work. Some of the best comic book movies out there are from DC, and yet they can't capture that magic in real life adaptations. So I think that I'm excited about the animated series because I think they're going to be able to tell stories in a much more inventive, a much more imaginative way than we would limiting ourselves to reality, to the actual physical reality, despite the advances in CGI. I think that they're going to be able to tell just perhaps deeper stories, and more so. I think that with the adult version of the animated series that we're going to get, they're going to be exploring some themes and telling some jokes that are going to either make you laugh or raise an eye. They're going to be absurd. And I'm really looking forward to Star Trek absurd. Absurd is Star Trek a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. All right. What you're describing is not somebody's Star Trek, but it's the Star Trek you want to see that pushes the envelope, pushes the boundary. And I like that because that can exist for you and the people who are on the same wavelength as you and will appreciate that. Somebody else is going to get a different show. And I think that's cool. Now, David just said, John, I thought it was mentioned that they want to do Discovery like Walking Dead, minimum 20 seasons. Thoughts on that? My thought is, please no. Please no. Man, Walking Dead just, boy, I was excited about it for a few seasons, and then I just wanted it to go away. Yeah, that was... That did not go well. I lost all interest. I stopped recording it. I stopped watching it. Didn't care anymore. So yeah, no, thank you. I don't want it to be like that. Different shows that have different angles, different takes, different mediums like animation versus live action. And look, and I love the fact, this comes back to the news item, I love the fact that we're getting shorts that can tell a really specific story, just focusing on a character or two. Obviously, I feel like this, with this short trek being Rebecca Romijn and Ethan Peck, at the very least, we know it's in that Pike world that we got, that Enterprise that we got, and that we all loved coming up on the end of season 2 of Discovery. So just being able to spend a few more minutes there and see what that's like and see what those characters are like. We got so little of Rebecca Romijn as number 1, and I thought what we got of her was gold, was just pure gold.
Yeah, so, I agree. Yeah,
cannot
I think
wait.
that is a short trek. That's an exciting little avenue to explore. Hopefully they start to tie in a little more to what we've seen and what is Discovery in some way, shape, or form. But also to answer, one of the questions you had asked me about, along this line is about representation.
Yeah.
I would argue that, or my hope is that I see more representation of Latinos, right?
Okay.
So for those of you that may not be aware, I was born here in America, but my entire family is from Cuba. I'm first generation American. So I speak Spanish fluently. I have very close ties to the culture. When I get angry, I usually switch into Spanish.
Nice.
So don't tailgate me. So, one of the things that I've noticed in Star Trek, and I want to say this about Deep Space Nine because my girlfriend and I were watching Deep Space Nine, and I felt like every time there was a Latino on screen, they'd die. Like it was like, what about that? There was that one episode with Gonzalez, I think it was Gonzalez, and he was like he played a main character in the episode with O'Brien, right? It was O'Brien and Bashir. They were all kind of caught and he's going to die. Anyway, he dies. But my point is...
Earl says the ship. He's here to save you.
Yes. Thanks, Earl. Thank you. So, it's... In Discovery, we finally saw a Latino actor. Now, would I call Wilson Cruz's role a lead role? I would push to say it was supporting. I mean, after all, he was gone for a majority of season 2, and they really pushed that story aside. And then again in season 2, we saw a Latino, and we saw even some Spanish being spoken in Star Trek with the Starfleet medical doctor, where when Pike calls him, he's like, "Oh, my abuela is the only one who doesn't use, who still uses these on-screen calls and not the holo projection."
Right.
But I find, I find that I miss a lot of my own culture in Star Trek, right? Where are the Latinos? Where are the Latino captains, right? The closest I ever got to representation in that degree was with Battlestar Galactica, with Edward James Olmos playing Adama. However, even that is obscured because he's wearing blue contacts. He's not Latino. He's not Caprican. I forget.
He's a Tauran.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Mhm.
So it's not explicitly said that he is Latino.
Mhm.
Instead, it's a Latino playing
A guy.
with a guy, right?
Yeah.
So I would love, and I remember when Discovery first came out, and there was a lot of pushback from certain groups about having a female Black actor playing the lead in a Star Trek role. And I'm like, yo, cool your jets, because more than anything, what for me in my representation, my captain would be Latino.
Mm-hmm.
And to have Sonequa Martin Green take on this role is phenomenal for the Star Trek franchise. So yeah, my future Star Trek would include a few more Ortiz, Gio, Hernandez, taking a more active participatory role in moving the story forward for Star Trek.
So it's interesting that in the very first draft and in Gene's version of The Cage, Jose Tyler is one of the bridge officers. Now, his last name is Tyler, but he was intended as a regular bridge officer character who has a Latino background. But we didn't get that character. What we got was a white guy playing that role, and then that became a role that just disappeared after The Cage then was rejected, and Where No Man takes its place and then carries on the rest of Star Trek history. I wonder, by the way, a couple of people in the chat here are just saying, Joyce says, what about B'Elanna? Any thoughts there about B'Elanna Torres?
So I forget if Roxanne Dawson is in fact, if she identifies as Latino. Because I remember reading into this, and I don't know that she does in fact identify as Latina. I know that it's in her heritage, it's in her blood. But B'Elanna was portrayed as a Klingon, right? I mean, one would argue that, well, she was like a Latina woman, so feist. Hold up. She was definitely more Cuban more Klingon than anything else. Now, if we were going to dive into the Torres part of her character, which did we ever talk about?
Not that I really recall.
Her surname, right? About her being a Torres. If maybe she had ripped into Spanish instead of going into Klingon when she was really upset, maybe Spanish every once in a while.
If somebody's tailgating her, yeah.
Right? If somebody's tailgating the Voyager, So yeah, I feel like even that was a missed opportunity. She was definitely the dichotomy of her humanity and her Klingon genes was definitely explored in Voyager. We even had that one episode where they're split. But what made her Torres? Right? What made her a Torres? And I don't think we ever got an answer to that.
Well, I guess what I come back to is I wonder what parts of what characters need to be explored to what extent. So we do go to great lengths with a character like Worf or with B'Elanna to explore their Klingon selves. And B'Elanna's half human, half Klingon, but as you point out, really the story is about her being half Klingon and her relationships with the rest of the crew. And with Worf or with Spock, we really do the deep dive into their cultural history. But with a lot of the other human characters, we just don't. So there's not a whole lot about Sulu being Japanese. There are little glimpses of that, and we had the luxury of having a character that got developed over 30 years, so we could kind of go back and put pieces together for him. I mean, I would even say with a character like Kirk, well, the thing that we know about his cultural background is that he's from Iowa. But that's pretty much where the identifiers for that character ends, and it really just becomes about the journey that he's on. It's not about the cultural context. So I I guess I'm wondering, what are the hallmarks or what are the character aspects that you would like to see explored, whether it's with a Latino character or otherwise?
I mean, I think I look at Discovery, right, which was probably one of the, or not one of the, but perhaps the most diverse casts in Star Trek production.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mentally looking around the bridge, right, and I think immediately of Owu, right? She and we only briefly got a backstory for her, right?
Mm-hmm.
That she was from a Luddite colony, right? But beyond that, we didn't really explore much, right? And we only got that one episode where she was really where she really had the opportunity to shine. With Wilson Cruz's character, at one point, it almost became like shtick that he was Latino, right? That when Georgiou calls him Papi,
Yeah.
which I take offense to because I am the first Cuban Star Trek Papi. How dare they? But I liked, for instance, how they treated even that glimmer with the doctor, right?
Yeah.
That Pike calls.
Yeah.
His bilingual, the fact that he's bilingual works its way into the conversation, right? It's my abuela still uses it. It is identifying that in the future, we are of many different locations and from many different backgrounds culturally, but we are all together as one.
Mm-hmm.
So if I say abuela, if I talk about my Latino heritage, it informs what's happening in the story. It informs you about who I am and what my identity is.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become just a checkbox. I think back on the DS9 documentary, right, where they did there was that sequence where he was going through the checkboxes of what Deep Space Nine covered, and they talk about LGBTQ representation, and he doesn't really check off that box. Well, if you're going to be representing other cultures, like you mentioned Sulu and his Japanese background, Scotty's background, the poor guy, was about his drinking. Like that's not what that's about.
Right.
And Latinos are not all Sofia Vergara from Modern Family, we're not all about that. We are a contributing force to the community, the global community, and hopefully the universal community.
Okay. Well, I want you to hold that thought, and I'm going to put the shout out again to our viewing and listening audience, whether it's about inclusion or any of the news of the week or any other Trek or non-Trek topic you want us to hit. Give us a call tonight, 669-900-6833. We lost Brian. Not physically, but just on the line. We don't have Brian. So, Brian, if you're listening, hit us back. Are you other folks who are in the chat? Go ahead and hit the link to the Zoom meeting, and Earl will connect you to me and Elijah. You can use the one tap from your smartphone. That will connect you again to that number, 669-900-6833, and you'll put in the meeting ID, and then you will be on with us. But we're taking this break because I want to mention somebody who is actually in the chat, who is a regular viewer of our show. He was saying hi right at the top of the show, and I see him. And he actually left a comment, Pixar would make Star Trek so interesting. I would love to see a Pixar version of Star Trek.
Two starships that are like, they love each other and they separated somehow, and then they come together. Tearjerker at the end. It's the tearjerker at the end.
You figured it out. I mentioned Scott because you have heard me talk about Scott.
Geckles. I'm sorry. It's got to be Geckles. I take it back. It's a love story about Geckles. That's the excellent Pixar story. Come on.
Gotta stop. Hold that thought. Scott Palm, he is in the chat tonight. And the reason we bring him up is that he is a friend of the show. And we have been promoting the fundraiser that we set up for Scott, the Heroic Curriculum. Now, Scott has teamed up with the Pop Culture Hero Coalition. That, of course, is the foundation created by Chase Masterson with the goal of ending childhood bullying. So the heroic curriculum, very specifically developed by Scott in coordination with the Pop Culture Hero Coalition, has two important goals. Number one is about teaching children who have serious physical disabilities the values of resilience, having a healthy identity, and breaking barriers, and other crucial mental health and life skills. And the other important part of this curriculum is reaching the peers of those children who have disabilities and teaching them values of inclusion and ending marginalization and being an ally for their peers. Now, I don't know what sounds more Star Trek than those types of values about diversity and inclusion with other people. Now, October is Bullying Prevention Month. So we're a few months away from the start of the school year. And what we want to do is reach our goal. And we are more than halfway there so that we can make sure that Scott's program can start then and run for a full 6 months. This is great work. This is crucial work, reaching kids who need to hear this message. And let me tell you, it's not the easiest thing in the world for Scott to do because Scott has cerebral palsy, which is why the Roddenberry Foundation is joining with you to help Scott help the world. So go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/missionlogpod. You will see a link to the fundraiser pinned right at the top there. And every dollar that you give will be matched by the Roddenberry Foundation. So you will be contributing to something that truly embraces the values of Star Trek and put it into action. And remember, the Roddenberry Foundation doubles your donation. So if you can only give $1, that dollar becomes $2. If you can give $5, that becomes $10. If you give 50, that becomes $100. So do that today at facebook.com/missionlogpod. Look for the post at the top of the page, make a donation. And I ask of you, even if you can't make a donation, just share the post. Just get the word out to as many people as you can. We would all appreciate it, and we will all be helping to make the world a better place. So, and there he is. There's Scott. Scott says another group that needs more attention is people with disabilities. There have been very few in Trek, and you are not wrong, sir. So, yeah. Cannot disagree with you there. So everybody who's in the chat right now, you can say hi to Scott Palm. He's the guy we were just talking about in our break. And please do. You know, I really got to know Scott pretty well over the last couple of years. He is a heck of a guy. I love seeing him at Vegas. I don't think he's going to be there this year. But he did actually, Elijah, you mentioned the DS9 documentary. Chase went up to Seattle and took Scott to the premiere there. So they got to hang out. Yeah. Yeah. So very cool.
And I would argue too, with representation with people with disabilities in Star Trek, I don't know that it would be, and Scott, I'm sure, could comment on this too, is that I don't know that it would be in anyone's best interest to say Star Trek cures everything. Right. Mm-hmm. But instead, how does Starfleet encourage and empower anyone with an accessibility issue, the disability, to contribute in the grander scheme of the Federation, right? It's not about trying to fix everybody. It's about giving people the tools. And I would argue that Discovery and any version of CBS has an opportunity now. We had the pads turn into iPads, right? Exploring technologies that could enable people with disabilities in some way and exploring what that might look like in the future.
Yeah. Hop on the phone with us, guys, 669-900-6833, or click the Zoom meeting link and Earl will connect you to me and Elijah. I want to kind of present a couple of different ideas here when we're talking about inclusion and representation. I remember meeting somebody years ago when I lived in New York. He was an actor and he had a physical disability. So he walked with crutches. And he all of his life, he has had to walk with crutches. And he was making somewhat a living as an actor. He would get, the occasional guest starring role, that kind of thing. And he made a very interesting point to me, which was, he said that, sometimes he would go in and he'd read for something, and the part was just sort of a generic part. And whoever was casting would just say, well, look, we're just casting the actor. where we're not really casting for a type, and we just want to make sure that we're treating anybody who has a disability like anybody else. And he was always the first to say, but it's not like anybody else.
Right.
If what I do on a day-to-day basis by navigating the world on crutches, like that changes how I do things. That makes me different from the way that other people have to interact with the world. He said, I would love to see that actually addressed in a script. I would love to see that addressed as a character trait, as something that a character has to deal with. And he ain't wrong, you know.
Right.
I now I'm going to fast forward a bit to something that I thought was an interesting idea and a very controversial one, and we'll probably have to have yet another show and other guests to talk about this and unpack this. Go back to the 80s, and there's that famous moment that a fan asked Gene Roddenberry at a convention, when are we going to have a gay or lesbian character on Star Trek? And Gene said, it's about time. And he went back to the production offices, and then this became a thing at Next Gen, trying to figure out how to do this. And the question became, well, do we do this in such a way where we're making it a thing that this is the gay character? Because then are we marginalizing, are we tokenizing that character? Are we making that the defining trait of this character? Or are we just saying, well, you wouldn't know anyway, because Star Trek isn't a show that digs too deeply into our characters' sex lives unless it's James Kirk?
Those hot button terms like, making somebody the token character and marginalizing.
Yeah.
I think it was easy to play and tell a story about Christopher Pike having had Christianity a major part in his life and influencing his decisions. That is why can't we write stories and write characters where their culture, their lives influence their decisions, right? I mean, we didn't think twice about that with the Pike. On the contrary, it was like, wow, that's deep. Wow, that's so deep. You had all this theology background. Well, okay, that's cool. But our lives, every aspect of our lives, every aspect of our cultures, every aspect of our lifestyles informs our decisions in a way that may not approach an idea of the way somebody else might. So, to make a character, gay or Latino or black or Asian, just to say it, just to do it, just to hit a checkbox, to hit that demographic, isn't going to do anything for a plot or story, right? But when there was one moment in Discovery where we almost got it, right? It was like, oh, we almost had it with Wilson Cruz, and he's talking about how his favorite dish is mofongo, right? I mean, that was close, but not close enough. At that point, saying that he liked the Latino dish was just saying he liked the Latino dish because he's brown.
Well, look, I identify every time Trip Tucker talked about catfish. So that speaks to me. Okay.
How does that inform his last minute decisions, those under the wire pressure moments, right? Like,
see, man, if I finish this, I can go have some catfish.
I guess, man. I guess that could have been it.
That's usually what's on my mind. It's like, if I finish this, go get some food.
But I think comparatively, I think of Chris Pike, right? His life, his parents taught him Christianity. His parents raised him to be a Christian. He went off and studied it for a bit. That is no more or less important to influencing a person's life than me being Cuban, than somebody's sexual orientation. And that should be the driving force to a character's decisions making, right? The way a character thinks, the way it did for Pike. It shouldn't be, oh, I'm going to speak really loudly because I'm Latino and that's expected of me. I pulled away from the mic for everybody's auditory.
I see. I feel like Discovery pulled its punches when it came to this theme of faith versus science, or belief versus empiricism. Like, they started to have that conversation, and then it just went away because it became about the mystery of the Red Angel and solve the mystery of the Red. And I'm like, look, just solve that in a couple of episodes, please. Just figure that out. Go ahead and reveal it. Then let's get back to the ideas that you're actually talking about.
Right.
And the only lip service they gave it again at the end was Michael Burnham saying, "Oh, so I guess this is a leap of faith that I'm going to do this thing." Well, except that you're covered in technology, and the smartest person in the universe is in the little shuttle next to you telling you what to do. You know?
Yep. But, yes, they most certainly pulled their punches. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that with Pike, I think collectively we all loved Pike. And I think we all loved Pike because he was written well. He was written well for a character that had an episode and a half in the original series. Right?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say? An episode and a half in the original series?
Yeah.
And the background that they gave him influenced his decisions. Right? Mm-hmm. And comparatively, Wilson Cruz's decisions were separate from his culture. So to answer that original question, yeah, I would like to see a minority character portrayed in a way that their culture informs their decision. In a I'm having lunch, I guess I'm going to have rice and beans. Like, that's an informed decision. Like, that's not what I'm going to do. Right? I want my culture, here's a great example for personally, right? Cubans tend to be considered very handy. Ingenuity is the mind the mind, right? You have Cubans that will fashion an old 1950s Ford pickup truck to be a boat, a motor boat.
Nice.
Across that 50-mile stretch of water.
Yeah.
Right? Cubans are, meticulous. They can they're I can't think of the word. Great engineering, right?
Okay.
So, I would give me a Cuban engineer who can whip something up like MacGyver, because that's and it's not necessarily a stereotype of the Cuban culture. Cubans have to be on their toes. They have to scrap, right? They are a struggling nation where everything is limited to them. So they have to get by with what they've got, right? So give me a Cuban captain that can MacGyver the crap out of something to save the warp core. There's the comparison that I can think of, the example that I can think of.
I like that. But just MacGyver the crap out of something, using your Cuban background skills. I think that's pretty awesome. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here, because a little while earlier I saw a comment here from Chris Riker, who says, "I don't recall Ken and John loving How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth, but I loved it exactly because it showed a new, for 70s TV cartoons, culture." Are you an animated series fan?
No.
Oh,
I tried, but I haven't gotten it.
Man, I'm so full of disappointment now. I mean, I usually
know what my homework is.
Well, look, to answer Chris, yes, I loved that episode. I think the Magics of Megas 2 really stood out because of its very provocative stance and its challenge to the audience. But How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth is neck and neck with Magics of Megas 2 in challenging the idea, like, oh, by the way, this god that this culture believed in, just an alien. This is something perfectly explainable by natural forces, and that's just a thing. But now we have the technology to understand it instead of being afraid of it. But the cultural context in How Sharper Than a Serpent's Tooth was like an Aztec Mayan-ish, sort of, ancient South American look and feel to that. And I forget the exact name of the alien god in that. But yes, but that was a really interesting attempt in the animated series to do something a bit different. So yes, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I know we haven't had any calls yet, but I think there might be a problem on There's a bit of a transmission issue on Facebook. So I don't know if it's worth sharing it in the chat with the number to call or whatnot. But
yeah, a lot of people have been having a bit of trouble with the chat tonight. But I did see the bunch of people jump ship and whatever YouTube. They said it was streaming very nicely over there. So we're going to do all right with that. Let's see. Scott is mentioning Spock's screwed up family. And then we also have Chakotay being brought up here. Tried a bit with Chakotay with bad results. And I think we're talking about giving some cultural context to him. I feel like you're probably not a Voyager fan. Are you, Elijah?
No, I like it. I don't. It's not my top, but I mean, I have watched it and I have gone through from beginning to end. I can't speak on behalf of, what the representation was for Native Americans. I felt that Chakotay was a bit of a caricature of that. It wasn't, I mean, there were some moments of that peacefulness, that tranquility, that kind of, that he tried to be with Jane. Maybe that's the kind of influence that I'm talking about, where, it's think first, then act. But then they took some left and right turns. But again, I can't speak on behalf. I'm not of Native American descent in any way, shape, or form to be able to comment as to how they were represented. But I feel like in some instances, first of all, I don't think he's even Native American. What's his name?
Oh, Robert Beltran.
Yeah, Robert Beltran. I think he's actually of Mexican descent.
Right.
With like no connection to Native American Mexican descent, I think. So, that in and of itself can be a problem, right? Is casting correctly. I don't know.
Yeah. I hear you. Right. Hey, very quickly, I want to do what we do as we're approaching the end of the show tonight. Still have room if anybody wants to call into the show. Again, that number is on the screen, or you can click on the Zoom meeting link. But I do want to mention, especially since we have Elijah here tonight, the rest of the Roddenberry Podcast Network. And you might be asking, what's on the Roddenberry Podcast Network? Well, you got Mission Log. That comes out Thursdays, and that is an episode-by-episode deep analysis of Star Trek. You got Mission Log Live, which, you are deep into right now. You've got Priority One Podcast. Oh, look, Priority One, join them live on Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. You got Women at Warp. You've got the Trek Files. The newest addition to the lineup is Daily Star Trek News, and literally in 10 minutes, you get a daily rundown of what you need to know about Star Trek in the headlines. Could be studio news, could be new releases, could be new products, could be actors in the news, a little bit of everything. In 10 minutes, you will get all the Star Trek news that you need for the day. Elijah, since I just mentioned the network, podcast.roddenberry.com. For anybody who has not picked up Priority One, what are they getting into when they download your show?
So on Fridays, you can get a weekly roundup of what's going on in the Star Trek multiverse, with a focus on Star Trek gaming. So we have a great working relationship with the folks over at Star Trek Online, who produce the free-to-play MMO Star Trek Online, where you can captain your own ship, whether you are Klingon, Federation, Romulan, you name it. You can continue the story in Star Trek Online for the free-to-play MMO. And like I said, we just today we had the community manager on our show to guest host. So every Friday, you can get your weekly roundup of news from all sorts of Star Trek multiverse goodness.
Very good. By the way, I got a note from Earl, our technical director. He says that Restream, which is what we use, says they're actually having trouble on the Facebook end of things. So that's what's going on. But funny enough, Dave in the chat says we're suffering through the great buffering of 2019. Yes, we'll all remember this day, the great buffering of 2019. And hey, and
you did this on purpose, didn't you, John? It was because I was your guest host. You were like, I got to censor this guy somehow.
I did, like, Ken's out of town. Let's just, who cares? We're just going to do this on a 56K modem. And yeah. But hey, Finn says daily Star Trek news rocks. Priority one rocks. So Finn, thank you for the support of all of these Roddenberry Podcast Network shows. So, Elijah, there's a little thing that we like to do on Mission Log Live that we haven't done in a while. And I apologize that I did not give you a heads up on this. Usually that's my job as kind of the guest wrangler, co-host. That would be the lightning round. Now, are you familiar with how lightning rounds work?
Maybe.
Okay. So a lightning round is like this. I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you in rapid succession. I don't want you to think about the answer. You're just going to blurt out whatever answer feels good at the time. Okay.
Are you going to bill me for the therapeutic session here?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Already people in the chat are excited about this. We got the graphic up. Lightning round is coming. All right, Elijah, favorite Trek series?
TNG.
Okay. Favorite Star Trek movie?
Wrath of Khan.
Favorite Star Trek starship?
Sovereign.
Ooh, the Enterprise E, huh? Okay. Borg Queen, yes or no?
Yes.
Ooh, favorite Star Trek bad guy?